Hello world, Christian Truther here, and I've been out of this loop for a little bit too long. I have not kept up with my videos. To explain that and to apologize, I just want to say that I'm a musician and I had a concert cycle after one of my videos that kept me really busy, and I let stuff fall down that I shouldn't have, and I didn't pick it back up again after I was done. That's on me. I started this discussion on this channel and I really should have done a better job. But before we go any further, hey Alexa, what time is it?
The time is 6:56 a.m.
Hey Alexa, what's today's date?
It's Saturday, June 22nd.
Hey Alexa, what year is it?
The current year is 2019.
Thank you. Okay, so to get all that established, at 4:54 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in 2019, on June 21st, the equinox occurred. So we are now 24 hours removed from that, or less than 24 hours removed from that, shortly after sunrise here in Michigan. And so I wanted to get that established because reasons, and I'll explain them in a minute. But first of all, I want to give you 20 reasons how you can know the true shape of the world. Always remember, I will always tell you guys the truth, so please give me a chance. I will always treat you guys with respect in the comment section and ask you guys to do the same with each other. Let's get into it. Number one, cartography and surveying. Cartographers and surveyors use map data based on a round earth formula all over the place in multiple industries. It's not just the government and NASA and the military, even Rand McNally and Google Maps and Apple Maps and things like that. There are people who need accurate maps for oil prospecting, for surveying. They need things for maintaining real locations of physical goods, for physical property, for investments, things of that nature. People use cartographers all over the world all the time based on round earth models, and none of them object to it. They use sources that some flat earth people deny should exist. Again, this isn't a problem. Everything works in the round earth model, and no one objects to that. Moving on, satellites. International Space Station is the most easily seen satellites that we have in our sky. You can get a pretty cheap telescope, go to a website that'll tell you how you can see it, when you can see it from your location. You can do this on your own. It was predicted to exist before we ever saw it. We saw it taking shape as predicted. It has changed over the years as predicted. There's never been any spotting of balloons, and we've been floating satellites up there since the 60s. And you're going to tell me that they have some sort of repulsor technology that we have no idea about? I don't buy it. The private sector would have come up with something after all this time. The government doesn't have a lock on knowledge, and they can't keep ideas out of people's minds. No one's come up with repulsor-based technology or anything similar to that to explain why satellites would be up there in a closed dome environment. It works because it's not a closed dome. It's outer space. GPS. Number 3, global positioning systems. The Russians have GLONASS. There's other global positioning systems other than the US standard one, but they all basically work on the same concept. Multiple satellites sending signals down. You don't send signals up, they send it down, and your phone triangulates based on multiple signals received from different satellites. Phone, GPS device, and it works over water, works in areas with dead spot connection, it works everywhere on the globe without fail. It's because it is a globe and not a flat plain earth, because the satellites are real. It does not work indoors because you need access to the sky. GPS works and is indicative of the shape of the world. That's 3. Number 4, satellite photos and videos. We have photos of the planet. Again, cartographers use this data and they don't have any problems with it. They've never said, hey, wait a second, someone must have faked this, because we've got photos and they're accurate. We've got live stream video, both from the International Space Station, which I mentioned earlier, and from Dish Network. You can see the Earth rotate. The video is always accurate with weather patterns in real time. Weather satellites, always accurate, like the Himawari 8 were discovered. You can see these images, these videos live, and they're always accurate wherever they're showing the Earth. We have photos and videos. Point 5, satellite communications. We receive TV and internet from satellites. In fact, I recently read about Starlink, which is something that Elon Musk is starting up and has been launching satellites. You can watch the video of the satellite launches. He wants to put over 11,000 of those things up there in order to be able to provide a mesh network of satellites using laser-based communications to lower the latency and make it available pretty much everywhere. And I know there's satellite internet already, but this would be, if it works, it would be something distinctly bigger than anything that's ever happened before. So that is so far 5 reasons. Here's the 6th. The lunar eclipse shadow. It's round, it's curved. Aristotle noted this and said, hey, what's causing the curve? Well, it's the curved shadow. It's got to be the Earth. That means the Earth is a curved surface. Because no matter where you are, the lunar eclipse is always a curve. So, and the same curve in the same pattern whenever you have a lunar eclipse. So the whole Earth must be curving and curving equally, which means that it's a globe. All right, it's pretty self-explanatory. By the way, if you don't believe that the sun is creating the light on the moon, just note, the light of the moon always points to the sun every time without fail. And when it's full, it means that the sun is on the opposite side of the planet. And that's the only time you can have a lunar eclipse. Okay, ham radio moon bounces. This is a way you can know if you get into ham radio and are willing to pay the coin. It's pretty expensive, but you can perform a moon bounce where you send radio waves that bounce off the moon. And then based off the known speed limit of radio waves transmissions, you can wait for the echo, time it, how long it took you to transmit it and come back, and you can calculate the distance to the moon. And that's going to be about 230,000 miles. The fact that we landed on it, yes, I'm going there. We landed on the moon. And NASA had over 400,000 people working for them. Other countries verified it. We put stuff on there that we can bounce lasers off of. If you have any doubts about that, just let me know what you think you know about the moon landing. But we really did go there. It's pretty incontrovertible, actually. Gravity implications. Guys, things fall and fall at the same rate consistently when you remove air or whatever medium is falling through from the equation. And they fall through a vacuum at the same rate. Why? Well, it's not an attraction like Newton thought it was. It's literally warping of space with objects of mass. And that's why bowling balls and feathers, which have very different mass sizes themselves, but compared to the Earth, they're both essentially nothing. That's why they fall at the same rate in a vacuum. They're not falling underneath or nothing's going underneath or above them. So it's not density and buoyancy. Gravity is real. And its implication is, on a flat surface, greater gravity is towards the greater mass. And so you would be feeling a pull the further out towards the edge of a flat Earth that you went. We don't feel that. Gravity is an indicator that the world is indeed round. Earth curvatures. There's two parts to this. First of all, line of sight limitations. The U.S. military calculates radio transmissions and how they have to get around the curvature of the Earth. So do all ham operators, by the way. There's a line of sight thing for radio waves, but it's also visually. And this is how you can do it visually. You can always see that at a certain distance, if you're over a flat surface, you will always be able to see part of a structure and part of it disappearing over distance, over a flat surface like water. What does this mean? Well, I was told by one flat earth skeptic that it was water and air density and being higher at those two things being higher air density and water content in the air at the lower elevations, and that's collapsing the light waves. They're not making it through it, and so that's why things are being cut off at the bottom. This was in response to a video that I had posted where I showed my elevation over water and that the bottom object was being cut off. And that doesn't work, and here's why. Because you can test yourself that no matter what the humidity point, which increases both the density and the water content, no matter what the humidity point, it may obscure how clearly you see the object, but not how much of the object you see. So it will always be the same, even if it's a 20-25 point difference in humidity. The fact is, the world is round, and it creates line of sight limitations that are the same regardless of water density in the air. Also, stick observations. If you have a north-south differentiator, if you've got a friend who's far to the north or far to the south from your location, both of you can, what is long, brown, and sticky? A stick. You can take a stick, straight stick, pole, put it in the ground till it shows no shadow. Then you can calculate how much of a shadow is being cast as the sun moves, and the shadows will be different. And you can use that in order to figure out the circumference of the Earth. So Eratosthenes did. Just follow his lead, guys. All right, southern hemispherical flight. Flights exist, and it's not just commercial, although you can spend about $4,000 and change, and you can, with a passport, you can make a trip around the southern hemisphere, and you could note that it would take you about the same amount of time to do a flight from the northern hemisphere at the same latitudes. Why? Because the world is a globe, and it tapers at either end, and so as you're circling the similar latitude, you're covering the same amount of space. On a Gleason map projection, you'd note that that distance would be much, much greater, and there's no reason why it would be about the same amount of time in the southern hemisphere as the northern hemisphere on a Gleason's projection. But the world's round, so it works. Like I said, it's not just commercial. There's also plenty of cargo flights. Star movements. There's a couple things here. First of all, Polaris has not always been our North Star. You don't have to do too much researching to find out that ancients described other stars around 200 BC. A scientist mariner pointed out that Kochab and Polaris were about the same distance away from actual true north. By the way, these ancient mariners really needed to know where and when you could spot certain stars, because they really needed to know where they were, and that's how they would figure it out. If you know where on Earth you would expect to see certain stars at certain times, then you can know where you are on Earth when you see those stars at certain times. So they needed to keep very accurate track of where the stars were, and the North Star, Polaris, has not always been the North Star for Earth, and the ancients described this. Also, polar movement in southern stars, particularly the Southern Cross, it's really easy to spot. You can see time-lapse videos online. They exhibit polar movement. Are they at the pole exactly? No, but they're pretty close to it, and you can see that it's got a very tight arc inside of one night. Not a huge spinning arc that it would be on a Gleason projection style world. Logistics. I pointed this one out a little bit ago, but it goes much deeper. No sea captain has ever said, hey, the trip from Chile to Australia was much further than the globe Earth said it should be. Time out, guys. We need to figure this one out. Or Johannesburg to Sydney, or Argentina, Brazil to Johannesburg. You guys get the picture. All these trips, because in the Gleason projection, they hide the spread with water. And so there'd be increased distance over water. No sea captain ever came along and said, time out, guys, let's figure this out. It's wrong, because it's not. The world is indeed round. Today we have cargo planes. Same thing. Logistics proves the world is round, because it's all predicated on the world being round, all flight times and distances, and no one's ever once came up and said, hey, this was wrong. Then there's scientific intersection. So I've got 3 points in this. The first one is that lunar distance was all confirmed independently. For instance, Hipparchus said the moon is about 67 Earth radii away. He didn't know how big the Earth was, but he figures about 67 Earth radiuses away based on his geometry. Well, that comes out to about 265,000 miles. How far do we know the moon is? Approximately 230,000 miles, give or take several thousands of miles, based on its actual point in orbit. He was pretty close. someone else said, hey, I can figure out how far away the moon is because we know how long it takes the moon to orbit the Earth, its orbital period. We know how long it takes for a full lunar eclipse to happen. That's about 109 minutes. And so we know the distance it's traveling. We know the distance it's traveling through then that eclipse. So therefore, we know the distance away from the Earth. We figure out the cone, and we're good. And so they came up with the distance to the moon. Nowadays, as I mentioned earlier, you can do a moon bounce. All these numbers are matching. Why? Because they're real. Independent observation, all matching. It's real. What about orbital calculations? I mentioned this in an earlier video, but I'll bears repeating. Kepler said, hey, I've got an equation here. Seems to factor orbits, but I'm missing some numbers. I mean, I can input numbers and everything works, but I'm missing some numbers. I need to know the exact distance to the sun, and I need this random other number that explains an attraction. Well, Cassini said, hey, there's the distance to the sun. And Newton said, hey, I've got this number for what appears to be attraction. And it worked. Put in the numbers into Kepler's three men working independently, and they didn't realize it. They all came up with parts of a puzzle that it perfectly explains the orbits, much to Tycho Brahe's chagrin, because he tried so hard, so very hard to make a heliocentric model work, and he couldn't. Orbital calculation. Then there's solar distance. Cassini figured out the distance. Then we can use moon angle trigonometry. If we form a right angle with the moon and the sun, and we know the distance to the moon, we can figure in the sun, we can figure out, if we know the distance to the moon and we've got right angles, we can figure out the distance to the sun. All these numbers are matching. Why? Because they're real. Scientific intersection. Then there's the impossibility of keeping this whole thing a secret. It really would be impossible because with the moon launches, over 400,000 people work for NASA and the contractors building things for NASA in order to be able to send men to the moon. And then other agencies around the world and independent astronomers and Russia, who were involved in a huge space race with, all said, yep, you guys went to the moon. It's not just that, but remember I was talking about logistics, I was talking about cartography. Too many people, plane pilots and ship captains, and too many people would have to be in on this. It's not just the government and the military and NASA. Well, which government? Because they're all in on it. Which military? Because they're all in on it. And that's not just NASA. There's so many space agencies, private ones. We even had an Israeli firm a few months ago try and land something on the moon. They failed, and they admitted to that, but they tried. Our president saying, well, hey, we're going to send people back to the moon. This time I want a woman to be on there. Okay? And NASA's trying to figure out how to do that in 5 years. That's a timeline that they were given. We're talking about Mars exploration. We're talking about mesh networks of satellites to give people internet. We're talking about hypersonic travel where they skip a plane across the atmosphere in order to speed up the travel across the oceans. Guys, the fact is, the world is round, and there's so many people in on it, and they're immune to your disdain if you believe that the world is flat because they know better. Now, the sun is hitting my face now, and that is what I wanted to show you guys, the last of the sun movement. So, there's the sun. And it's just cleared the treetops. This device I've been holding in my hand, pointing it towards the sun. And if you look at it, about 70 degrees to the east. Okay, so why is that important? Well, let's see here. If you look at a Gleason's projection, here in Michigan, we're going to have about over 15 hours of sunshine. And if you look at a Gleason's projection, no matter where you believe the Earth, where the sun is rotating around a flat plane Earth, it completes a 360-degree circuit every 24 hours. So when I've got over 15 hours of daylight in one day, which you can check just about everywhere in Michigan it does, then about 2/3 of the day is going to be sunshine. We'll just draw a V. with 1/3 of the pie, and you would see that the sun should be rising significantly to the north. It should be north-northeast from here at this point. It's not. You can test this yourself, wherever you are. Is the sun rising in the east and setting in the west? Or today, is it rising in the north-northeast and setting in the north-northwest? It's not the second one. The sun tells you that the world is indeed round. Guys, the truth will set you free. And I hope that this has been helpful. And again, I apologize for letting this one go for a little while. And we're going to try and keep the discussion alive and flowing. This is Christian Truther, signing out.